agus a Taoiseach banna ceist le leis an géircéim atá an ó híh cuasaí títhíochta go náisiúnta agus go háda dingáile. Agus an ról faoi le atá ag do rialtas, ag na policy agus na bartas atá agah ó híh cuasaí títhíochta atá ag cothú na géircéim sin. Taoiseach, today I walked from my privileged accommodation to the Dáil, less than 500-600 metres perhaps. I counted 16 people homeless, living in the doorways. 9 of them were outside of the Gaiety Theatre. The drama closed inside and the drama continuing outside on our streets. And yesterday you had a golden opportunity to do something different. We're talking monopoly money, billions. Every single respected institution is telling us to spend so that we help the solidarity of our community, that we build communities, and we finally realise that we can't talk about an economy without talking about people. Yesterday, I listened to Mr. McGrath's speech, and I call him the passive minister, or the minister of the passive tense, the minister of the seher breather, because he talked about rents rising and house prices rising without any responsibility, without looking at the causes of the homelessness that I've mentioned and the increasing waiting list directly related to government policies. Now, Minister Taoiseach, if you come back and tell me that homelessness is complex, let me preempt that. I agree with you. Some people are on our streets because of complex problems, but the vast majority of homelessness and our waiting list has been caused by government policies repeatedly. So if we look at what you did yesterday, you gave the vast bulk of public money to the private landlords under the HAP system, the RAS system and long-term leasing. We know from Galway where people are waiting more than 15 years, Taoiseach, and in 15 years, I can name them out, they've never been offered a house. That in itself deserves an inquiry. But the only game in town since 2016 has been the housing assistance payment, enshrined in law by Fine Gael and Labour. It's time for you to do what your minister said yesterday when he wasn't using the seher breather, and he talked about we need a radically, what did he say precisely? We need a radical reappraisal of how we deliver our housing. So my question to you today is, Minister, can we for once just leave policies behind us in terms of ideology? We have people on our street, we have a huge amount of people on waiting lists. I could go into all the figures for Galway. A commitment to building public housing on public land as an integral part of the solution.
First of all, I thank the Deputy agus saying team le gur níl an áras gur an géirchéim is mótá gwinglas mud an vírus coronach ná géirchéim tíochta an aspa tíochta de gan áhhainte na tíre agus go háire daoine nach bhfuil intige gáin éair. Agus an béim iné san cána snéis sé bhí ann ná béim tíocht puiblí go háirithe a chur a bhain. Sé tá geiste going ná 9,500 tuthe puiblí an bhrín chuing, agus in íag sin 10,000 gach cén bhliain. Sin an aim atá going, agus an príomhrod ná tá na háisina agus tá an targad ann chuna sin a chur a bhain. So I agree with the Deputy's emphasis on commissioning and building public houses alongside with affordable, but specific targets around building social homes, building them. The HAP is something that has happened over the last number of years. I believe in rebalancing that. I think the less on HAP and the more on increasing our housing stock, the better. And that's what we're determined to do in terms of the social housing bill. So, and actually, Minister Michael McGrath believes passionately in that. And with the Minister for Housing, and I took a particular interest in this myself, I wanted a direct build. I think local authorities should start building. And I'm saying this to local authorities out there across the country. The funding will be made available. We've changed the regulations as well to make it more stream. You can do it, more effectively and faster. Go out there and build. And build social housing. And then in the short term, we've moved on homelessness, given the situation with COVID and everything, because to a certain extent there's been some capacity came into the system from March and early spring onwards, and the Minister has put a call out for housing. We're trying to get greater bills for single people in particular who are homeless, and there's an absence of suitable accommodation for them. So I think that the funding package yesterday is quite strong on homelessness, I would say, very strong. And the target is to try and drive down the numbers and to make that a priority and in line with the policies of the NGOs who are at the front line of the homelessness issue. The private sector will have a role to play, but I think the state can primarily do its job effectively, not only by creating conditions for construction to happen, but critically to ensure that the state directly enables the building of social housing, enables that the critical skills are there to deliver it over the time, and that's why multi-annual funding is required to underpin the social housing programme and has been built in. So in other words, it's not people living from year to year as to will we get the same amount of money next year to follow through on what we've built this year or what we started this year. So that multi-annual funding is critical to the realisation of the social housing targets, and I'm very committed to doing that.
I think that the worst thing that's happening with each government is language means nothing. I hear what you're telling me. The actual reality is you're putting over 1.2 billion into the private sector directly under the 3 schemes I mentioned, not to mention all the others like the help for the first-time buyers and so on that the Parliamentary Budgetary Office has clearly shown us didn't target the right people. I've only 40 seconds. Taoiseach, and I'm really tired of this type of language. You did not put money in the budget to rectify the housing crisis. The homelessness is a symptom of it. In Galway, very soon, we will almost have the same amount of people on HAP as we have in social housing. Can you imagine that? We will have the same number of people in HAP accommodation as in social housing. And you're looking at me perplexed. But the housing assistance payment has been the only game in town. We privatised our public housing. You keep talking about social housing. It is not social housing. It is private housing temporarily lent to the state so that the landlord can make a profit, the developer can make a profit, and the only person down is the tenant who has no security. You made a further allocation to the Land Development Agency, who are clearly going about doing a developer's job. We have a situation in Galway where we have no master plan for a city that's one of 5 developed, destined to grow. No master plan. The Kent Station doing its own thing, the docks doing its own thing, the Dyke Road doing its own thing, and the City Council there as I don't know what, an inactive part of this as we have developer-led development. Your predecessor, I rarely go over time, and I thank you, rarely, not your predecessor, but the previous Taoiseach acknowledged that the development in Galway was developer-led. We have a major housing crisis consequent on government policy. You did not avail of the opportunity yesterday to change that radically.
Just because you say we didn't doesn't mean we didn't. We did. And I want to say, I don't use language lightly. I haven't been in government for 10 years. The housing assistance programme has been there for about that length of time, so less maybe. If you dismantle HAP now, as you seem to be indicating, you create homelessness immediately. So this can't happen. You can't dismantle HAP. The housing assistance programme is there. It's a very large intervention now. It's there. What we did yesterday was provide funding for 9,500 units. Okay? Direct bill between local authorities and approved housing bodies. That's what happened yesterday in terms of the social. It'd be the largest, and then 10,000 every year after that. That gives you a 50,000 target on the social housing side. It's the largest ever actually, but like we have a larger population and so on like that. I'm not going into who's big and the big small. I'm simply saying the issue for me will be delivering that. That's the issue actually. The policy change is there. The funding has been provided and ring-fenced for the local authorities and approved housing bodies to build social houses at scale and to get it done over a 5-year period. And we're saying the money is multi-annual. Now, you're correct in some respects. Within the system, the housing assistance programme became the mechanism by local authorities to say we are resolving social housing issues through a rental process. Yes. And the problem with that then is, in time, that crowded out the private market to the extent that we made it unaffordable for many people. The state did. It's never a policy that I was exclusively in favour of. And I always believe there should be a social housing balance to it. And then a strong, vibrant private sector as well. And we need an affordability dimension to make sure that young couples in particular can realise their aspiration to purchase their home. Delivery is going to be the key here in getting the job done.
We're way over time. That concludes